the poisoner in the trains, who kept the entire suburban area of Moscow in fear. He has 17 victims on his account. And the most amazing thing is that the criminal managed to avoid the corresponding. His crimes are punished. How did a young boy, and, by the way, the investigator's son, become one of the most terrible maniacs poisoners of recent years? What prompted him to operate in the trains? And what trick allowed a cold-blooded killer to shorten the term? Alexei was born in 1986 in Vladivostok. As a teenager, he often ran away from home, and in 2000 he got as far as Moscow. There he briefly got a job selling pies. But soon I had to go back. It is no wonder that with such a free lifestyle, a teenager got into bad company. At the age of 16, Alexei would have been arrested for theft, caught red-handed. The court sentenced him to 1 year in prison. Vygovsky served his term in full, but when he came out, he did not leave a predilection for theft. Soon after his incarceration, Alexei decided to move to Moscow for good. Of course, there is a reason in such a large city there are more opportunities for theft, and less likelihood of being caught. At first, the thief was engaged in ordinary pocket thefts. But at some point he stopped being satisfied with this way of earning. It was too risky. And if they catch you red-handed again? And if they identify you later? And if they use force? Vygovsky did not differ in athletic physique, and he would hardly be able to resist someone in a fight. So the pickpocket had an idea: you need to first bring the victim into unconsciousness. But how to bring a person into unconsciousness? Especially in a crowded place? It's not so easy to do this. But later, an experienced thief decided to put potential victims to sleep with the help of neuroleptic drugs. The plan was as follows: the guy mixed strong alcohol with a neuroleptic in a flask, and with this delayed action poison he went to the commuter train.
Hey, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You have to subscribe to the channel and like it so you don't miss new videos.
Most likely, he chose daytime, when there were not so many passengers in the trains. In the train, I was looking for a victim. Most often they were middle-aged men. I sat down and started a conversation. When the interlocutor relaxed and subconsciously imbued with confidence in random, to a fellow traveler, he seemingly casually took out a flask and offered to drink, either on the occasion of his own birthday, or to celebrate the birth of a child. Now it seems very strange to us. How can you accept something from the hands of a complete stranger to you? How can I take a sip from someone else's flask? But do not forget that the beginning of the zero is a slightly different time. At that time there was no such active prevalence of the internet. People simply did not know about many cases of theft or murder. For example, now the news about the murder in the train would spread at a speed of light, and at that time, many could well have remained in happy ignorance about the robber working in suburban electric trains. In addition, the relative proximity of the Soviet era also played a role, when it was customary to trust each other. It is worth noting, and the fact that most of those who died at the hands of a maniac poisoner are people in principle gullible by nature. For example, according to relatives and friends, Maxim Pakamushkin, poisoned in 2008, was such a person. Some of them were already relatively elderly, like, for example, Alexander Prusky, poisoned in 2008, could wake up in such a fatherly feeling for a young-looking boy. And, in order not to offend the young father, or birthday boy, they agreed to take a deadly sip. By the way, the poisoner, before treating a fellow traveler, would certainly take a sip from the flask himself. In fact, of course, he pretended, and this also lulled vigilance. After a while, from such a cocktail, alcohol with the drug azaleptin, a person lost consciousness, and then the criminal calmly searched his pockets, and went out on the next stations. A passenger peacefully dozing on a commuter train did not cause anyone any questions, so it was not immediately revealed that a person was ill. And, of course, the criminal was already far away by that time. It would seem, why give to their victims a neuroleptic drug? Wouldn't it be easier to take sleeping pills? Nevertheless, Vygovsky was not so simple. After all, his main goal was not only to deprive the victim of the opportunity to resist, but also to obtain guarantees for the future that the person will not remember exactly who robbed him, and only a neuroleptic could give such a guarantee. A huge dose of the drug had a negative effect on the brain, and if a person survived, he did not remember anything, getting serious and irreversible changes in the brain and nervous system. The first victim of the criminal poisoner was a young man about 30 years old. He was peacefully riding in a commuter train when a decent-looking guy sat down with him and offered to drink to his born son. Then the unfortunate man was found dead, in the same train. Moreover, the cause of death was also established, a potent drug. But because of the negligence of the then police, everything was blamed on that the man himself killed himself. They say, the guy poisoned himself, and there is no crime here. Although the deceased's bank card was stolen, and they tried to withdraw money from it. The bank's cameras even captured a hazy image of a man at an ATM. But all to no avail, no one wanted to take on this case. In 2006, shortly after the beginning of his career as a poisoner, Vygovsky went back to prison. But not for murder, but for theft. He served a year again and was released. Realizing that no one cares about the murder in the trains, the guy decided that he had found a gold mine, and turned around with might and main. To be more conveniently, he put together a gang, taking 2 more people to his team, Shukrat Juriev and Ilya Trubunov. The accomplices lived together, in an apartment rented by them for 3. Why did Vygovsky need it? As we remember, he was very careful. That's why Juriev and Trubunov stood on the lookout, while the poisoner was getting drunk and picking the pockets of his next victim. This went on for 2 whole years. During this time, the accomplices managed to rob more than 30 people. Alexei got rich, began to buy himself beautiful clothes, bought a foreign car, made expensive gifts to his girlfriend, stole from the victims Vygovsky not only money, but also personal belongings, jewelry, which he then resold on the black market. It is likely that 32 people are only a part of the victims of the criminal. Someone could survive and simply not contact the police. And some dead bodies found in trains at that time could not be checked for the presence of neuroleptics. So the exact amount. Vygovsky's victims are shrouded in obscurity. A serious search for the criminal began only after one of the survivors contacted the police. That's when they remembered about the video recording from the built-in camera at the ATM. The poisoner was taken right at the train station. He was just about to get on the next train and had a flask with a hell potion with him. At the investigation, Alexei assured, he did not want anyone to die. And he didn't know that the people he left unconscious were dying. Therefore, he should be judged solely for unintentional causing of death by negligence and robbery. The court found this interpretation quite logical. Therefore, Vygovsky was not given a life sentence, which he fully deserved by the number of victims, 17 killed and 15 injured, crippled for life, but only 22 years and 3 months in a strict regime colony. Thus, Vygovsky will be released around 2033. And maybe even earlier. After all, no one cancelled the parole for exemplary behavior. One of the accomplices of the maniac poisoner, Shukrat Juriev, got 15 years, and Ilya Trubunov died during the investigation. He had a severe addiction. Of course, Alexei Vygovsky cannot be called a classic maniac. He killed for the purpose of profit. The guy wanted a luxurious life, but the thief clearly did not seek to work. He had been addicted to thefts since childhood. They seemed to him an easy way to the passionately desired enrichment. And yet Vygovsky was not a traditional pickpocket either. It is worth remembering that petty thieves, as a rule, do not go to murder. For them it is unprofitable and troublesome. But this character was not like that. He did not stop for a second and killed 15 people in cold blood. 2 more victims were on the account of his accomplices. It is hardly possible to trust Vygovsky that he did not know about the death of the victims. The actions of the Moscow poisoner are given out in it, a fearful and even cowardly person. Surely after the first case, which ended, by the way, with murder, he did not monitor the news, did not try to find information about the body found in the train. Moreover, the further continuation of the terrible career indicates that Alexei was well aware of the fatal outcome in the case of the first victim. And it is the absence of punishment. for this crime prompted him to continue. So is Alexei Vygovsky a maniac? Most of all, it is his nickname, the Moscow Poisoner, that suits him, but still. It is likely that Vygovsky, like a real maniac, felt some satisfaction from the murder process, or from leaving a person in danger, from playing with his victim. The thirst for easy money is truly indestructible. In 2019, a follower of Alexei Vygovsky suddenly appeared. It was 26-year-old Murat Sabanov. He acted in a similar way, in a hot summer. In 2019, he approached young people on the street and offered them to drink soda. As we can see, over the past years, not everyone has managed to become more careful, and the poisoning scheme has remained quite working. One of Murat's first victims was a girl, Ludmila Chizhova. At the beginning of June, she was walking with friends on Chisty Prudy. Suddenly, a guy who introduced himself as Murat joined their company. During the walk, the girl complained that she was thirsty, and the stranger offered her a cold soda. After the first sip, Ludmila passed out, and ended up in the hospital in a comatose state. The girl spent 3 days in a coma, which followed from poisoning with an unknown psychotropic substance. Subsequently, it turned out that at least 24 people were injured in a similar way. A young man who introduced himself as Murat, then Anwar, then Azamuth, offered random, familiar, Fanta, cola or even just water. He previously added phenocepam and tramadol to the bottles. These drugs were found in Sabanov's personal belongings. And after the victims lost consciousness, he took their bank cards, cash and jewelry. Murat wielded, exclusively in the Bahmani district, because I was familiar with the local police and therefore felt confident. As a rule, all of Sabanov's victims were in a state of mild alcoholic intoxication. They went to clean ponds to have fun and relax, and, possibly, therefore, they did not show proper vigilance. As a result, the robber was detained. During the investigation he was charged with 30 episodes of poisoning and robberies. 5 victims were seriously injured. And the poisoner managed to get valuables and money, steal a total of 1 million rubles. Currently, a trial is underway, and the follower of Alexei Vygovsky is clearly facing a considerable period of time. By the way, a case of negligence was also initiated against police officers familiar to the criminal, who once released him on his own recognizance after his arrest, after which poisoning, of course, continued. And this is despite the fact that the victims' belongings, their bank cards, jewelry were found in Murat Sabanov's pockets. The accused admitted his guilt at the trial only partially following the example of Vygovsky. Sabanov also states that he had no intention of causing serious harm to the victims.